continuing with an analysis of the Gospel of John and verses in particular that I believe relate to a practice of Christian mysticism. So, chapter 13, verse 20, Yeshua said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me." So I believe this isn't just speaking to his time and place, as in him sending out the apostles to spread his gospel and to do healing work. I think it actually relates to us too in the post-resurrection period, wherein his spiritual body is available to all of us in a one-on-one dynamic. So the question then is, who is he sending? Right? He says, whoever receives the one I send receives me. So the way I interpret this is that since Kairos moments always involve other people, whoever that other person is could be said to have been sent by the Messiah, even though they aren't consciously aware of it. How this works on a metaphysical level, I couldn't tell you. But what I do know is that there is this phenomenology of grace that has consistent characteristics, or a consistent signature, otherwise known as name, that works in a way that not only can provide healthy desires, but it can also remove abuses. So the two things that would improve our lives, it offers, right? So it's a loving phenomenology. It's a form of grace. It is grace. And the other reason why it makes sense to me to associate this with the Messiah is that in order to align with this grace, you actually have to perfectly follow his commandments, namely the greatest commandments. You need to have your mind aligned with love for God, others, and yourself. If you don't, and you let your heart be troubled, to quote Yeshua, with some stressful emotion thought, it's going to take you out of alignment, and you're going to miss the Kairos opportunity. So, returning to this verse 20, chapter 13, verse 20. Who receives the one I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. So I believe the latter portion there, he's talking about Heavenly Father having sent him, and then he in turn sends someone to us in his presence, or through his presence. So this person that is part of the phenomenology of the grace, whether it's for a desire or to carry out justice, namely to rebuke and abuse, you could call this person the Kairos messenger, or messenger is also translated as angel. So you can think of the other person as a Kairos messenger or Kairos angel. Again, even though they're not consciously aware of it. And an interesting thing with this phenomenology is that you may actually at times realize when you were that messenger. I've had this happen to myself where I recognized the Kairos characteristics, but I was on the other side of it. Like the Kairos opportunity was for someone else, but I was the one involved in it. Like basically they were supposed to interact with me in this 1 second moment of opportunity, but I didn't plan it out. It just, from my point of view, it just happened spontaneously. I didn't even realize that the phenomenology was manifesting at that moment, but nevertheless it did. And I've noticed this happen more than once and realized that those three main characteristics were there. Thinking from their perspective, it would have been subtle, it would have been sudden, and they only had 1 second to respond. So in this way, I think it's fair to comment that the Messiah in this way is exercising his authority as king over the earth, that he can actually mold phenomenology of conscious beings in a way to serve his purposes. Again, I couldn't begin to explain this in detail. I just can explain what I observe as far as these fundamental characteristics. I have noticed that there are 6 forms of the Kairos moments that have particulars beyond the 3 fundamental characteristics of suddenness, subtlety, and lasting 1 second. And I have written those details out in a guidebook in case you're interested in that. So I'll move forward now with the Gospel of John. Chapter 13, verse 38. Jesus, Yeshua, answered, "Will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. So he was talking to Peter, but a couple things here relate to his presence in Kairos moments. Firstly, as I talked about in the previous talk, this idea of laying down your life. You need to be willing to lose your life, namely your social life, in order to align with his grace. You need to be fearless and bold, either moving for desire or against an subtle abuse. And just to comment on the latter, how it really is a seemingly risky proposition, especially when it's subtle, is because people, you could say, have a sort of plausible deniability. And so, you might think, oh, it's not worth saying anything because they might just act as though they weren't actually being aggressive, deceptive, or stealing in any manner. The subtlety of it makes it seem not worth engaging in, but it actually is. There's, I think, a popular book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. Well, that's actually the opposite of the truth. When things get to a large scale, they're actually no longer controllable, right? We can nip things in the bud on the abuse side much more easily when you address it at the subtle level, and it's actually much more powerful that way, because you can actually have a effective rebuke that can break the pattern of abuse and stop it from escalating. And then likewise on the desire side, it can seem risky, to act on a subtle indication or of desire on your side or for someone else. So I think it's helpful to think of the life he's talking about losing as in social life, because you're probably not going to be fearing for your biological life in either case, whether it's a subtle abuse or having to do with a subtle desire. It's more of a worry of losing kind of a social standing, a social life. So that's the first half there of verse 38. And in the second half, truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. So this 3 times in one day, I find corresponds to the frequency of Kairos moments, which are, in my experience, oftentimes, up to three times a day they occur, whether a desire or justice. I haven't noticed any pattern as far as, it's always, 2 justice Kairos moments and 2 desire Kairos moments, or, any total number. I find that that is, you could say, random. It's usually, in my experience, 1 to 3 per day. If you're out and about, obviously if you're in a cave, up in the Himalayas or whatever, not around any other people, well, probably not going to have any Kairos moments involving other people. But if you're having a normal day out and about with other people around, I find usually 1 to 3 a day. But I think that's part of the randomness of it. I think is part of in keeping with it being unexpected, right? Because that's one of the core characteristics of the Kairos, is that you don't see it coming. So if it was like this set pattern, then you could expect that pattern, and therefore it would undermine the unexpectedness, which is necessary to keep us on our toes, so to speak, keep us giving full effort, because we never know the day or the hour. And then also, Yeshua having said that he denied him 3 times is significant, because that's actually what we're doing when we turn away from the Kairos calling, is that we're actually denying the Messiah. In a sense, we could even say betraying him, right? Because he's offering us this grace, and we're turning away, we're denying him, similar to how Peter did, as illustrated in the Gospels. Okay, moving forward to chapter 14, I'll read verses 1 through 3. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. Again, this is pure Christian mysticism, and it relates to verses that I discussed in previous talks on the Gospel of John here. So let's start with let not your hearts be troubled. So this is speaking to a requirement for alignment with the grace. If you have a troubled heart, in other words, if you're following a stress-filled, toxic emotion thought, which, by the way, I've identified come in 8 forms: fear, sloth, anger, depression, suspiciousness, craving, mischievousness, and conceitedness. So if you cling to any thought of those 8 varieties, they all have stress with them. That's he also talks about peace being part of the alignment. But returning to this beginning of chapter 14, it says, believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. So what are these rooms? Again, it's to me just pretty ridiculous that this is reduced somehow to fit into the Paulinist blood, power, atonement theology. I mean, to me, it's speaking of mysticism. In my Father's house are many rooms. Okay, so what are these rooms? And what is he preparing? Right? He's talking about, I believe, these kairos moments that are a space of grace through this phenomenology that he prepares through, again, his metaphysical power, where he can actually mold. Perhaps it's through quantum mechanics of some kind. Can actually mold phenomenology of our everyday life experience to prepare a place for us. But the place has a door, right? The room has a door, and you have to go through the door, right? He is the door, as he said previously. So it doesn't just fall in our laps. It's an opportunity. The door appears before us to enter into that room, or as he said previously, to enter into that green pasture. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. So like I said in a previous talk, this is about alignment with his presence, so that we're actually where he is when he manifests, right? We're not hesitating. We're not overlooking him. We're acknowledging and aligning with his calling. Okay, chapter 14, verse 15. And I'll read a few verses forward. If you love me, you will keep my commandments, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper to be with you forever, even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, for he dwells with you and will be in you. So I believe this is speaking to intuition, which is a form of divine guidance that we receive. So intuition is a subtle thought to either do something or not do something, to say something or not say something. And in my experience, it's always clearly not a bad idea, but it's never clear as to why it's a really good idea. So it can be easily discarded as unimportant or unnecessary. You might have the intuitive thought, but then think in response to it, well, I don't see why I should do that. Like, I don't see why it matters for me to do that. And then so you don't do it. It's not, you don't rebuke you don't reject the intuitive guidance because it's clearly a bad idea, because intuition is never suggesting anything that's clearly bad. It's that it's kind of this take it or you could say 50-50, like I could do it or I could not do it. It seems like it doesn't matter. But as you get to recognize intuition more and you pay attention to what happens when you do follow it, it's always amazing. In my experience, you find out, oh, wow, that worked out really well in a way that you couldn't have predicted. But you realize in a loving, omniscient, omnipresent intelligence knew what it was going to lead to, right? So like, to give a simple example, you have an intuition to, go a different way home. And you think to yourself, well, I could do that, but I could just keep going the same way. I don't see why I need to go that way. But say you actually follow the intuition this time, right? And then you go, and then something incredible happens. Like you see an old friend that you haven't seen in years, walking down the street. And so you pull over and reconnect with them. Something like that, right? Something you couldn't have known was going to happen, but God knew. And that's why you got that guidance. But again, it's important to remember that the intuition isn't always to say something. Sometimes it's to not say something or not do something. I remember one time very clearly, I was talking with someone and I had intuition to not say something. But what I was thinking of saying wasn't clearly bad. Like it wouldn't have appeared to, I think, anybody as a bad thing to say. But I was getting a strong intuition to not say it anyway. But I rejected the intuition. I was like, I'm going to just say it anyway. Why not, right? I don't see why I shouldn't say this. And it turned out that it had a very negative consequence. The other person had like an association and I guess past experience with what I was talking about that just took the mood and conversation into a very negative place. It was just unfortunate. So I couldn't have known that would have happened. And the other person wasn't like upset with me for having said what I said. It was just an unfortunate occurrence that could have been prevented if I had followed the intuition to not say what I was about to say. Okay, continuing with chapter 14, verses 18 through 21. Yeshua said, I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. So let me just stop right there on verse 18. I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. Yeshua is saying, I will come to you. Right? That's Christian mysticism. Right? If he's saying he's going to come to us, he's talking about a personal encounter, right? That's what these kairos moments are. Number 19, or verse 19. Yet a little while and the world will see me no more, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. And that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. I believe this is, again, talking about the alignment. And him saying, because I live, you also will live. I believe means that because his life continues in the spiritual form, he offers us greater life or satisfaction. So because he was resurrected and became an omnipresent friend, an omnipresent Messiah to us all, we can also find eternal life or lasting satisfaction through alignment with his presence. In that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. Whoever has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him. So again, here's the key requirement for alignment, which is the keeping of his commandments, which, for whatever reason, I mean, I guess sabotage being the reason, you have the Paulinist church telling you that they have you go from one extreme to the other, but avoid what he actually taught, which was the greatest commandments. They say, well, the law is abolished, follow Paul's amoral nonsense, because Paul is, a true apostle, blah, 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 all those lies. And also because you know, all the 430 laws of Judaism are not important for us anymore. So neither, you know, so they're giving you two options, but the truth is neither of them, right? So it's this either or fallacy, right? The greatest commandment is neither this uh, legalism of, you know, moral law in Judaism, nor is it this amoral abandonment of the moral law altogether. It's the greatest commandments. He simplified it and clarified it and purified it as love in yourself, right? But they don't teach that. They want you to think, they want you looking in all the wrong places and away from the truth, which was given by the Messiah, right? The truth that sets us free. It's just terrible what passes for Christianity. Okay. Whoever has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me, and he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him, right? Manifest myself to him. What does that mean? It means he's manifesting in your daily life. Okay, moving on to verse 23. Jesus answered him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. Right? He's going to come to you and make their home with you, right? So it's very personal, and it's direct to you as an individual. All right, I think I'll end this talk here.